Well, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Here at Onfido, we are holding our webinar, Fraud Pop Culture. Is it raising awareness or damaging consumer trust? So I am presenting the main presentation. My name is Simon Horswell, and I'm the Fraud Specialist Manager at Onfido. And later on at the end of the presentation, I'll be joined by my colleague, Cody Huzzy, Senior Solutions Engineer, who will do a brief product demo. So we're all familiar, I think a majority of us are familiar with recent dramatizations and true crime documentaries that have been popping up on the different streaming platforms. Tinder Swindler is one good example. We have The Dropout. Another one we've mentioned here is Inventing Anna. And I think this is just profiling the fact that fraud is popping up in popular culture more and more frequently. You can still go as far back as a couple of decades ago, and some of you might even remember the famous film Catch Me If You Can, that depicted the story of the famous fraudster and document forger Frank Abagnale. So as a result of this, Onfido thought we'd run a survey. We surveyed approximately 2,000 people in the US and the UK to see if the consumers had changed their understanding or their perceptions of fraud based on these different publications and broadcasts. What was interesting was we found that around 2/3 of consumers are now more cautious as a result of having watched these programs. So that's 2/3 of people. In addition to that, we found that around 6 out of 10 consumers are now worried about trusting other people online because of these dramatizations and these documentaries. So they're definitely having a profound impact. And yet at the same time, there are a segment of society that seem to be a bit desensitized to them. So there are 17% of consumers that believe they wouldn't fall for identity fraud. And this is despite the fact that in the US alone, I think last year, romance scams accounted for about $1 billion worth of fraud to the victims. And then I think in the UK last year, we were looking at maybe £1.3 trillion that were lost through investment scams and through payment fraud. There is also a knock-on effect as well. 29% of consumers, so almost a third, are now more skeptical of businesses that are operating online. The good news is 2/3 of those people also agreed that they would be more likely to trust businesses online if they were using some secure identity verification solutions to help make sure that they were aware of who's using the platforms and preventing social abuse. So there's definitely a growing pressure from the consumers to improve that awareness. Now, to make life a little bit harder, what we've also found, as well as the consumer trust, fraudsters are actually improving and getting better, which I'm sure is no surprise to anybody. So let's look at some of the data that we've captured over the last couple of years. So every year, Onfido produces an annual fraud report, normally around the beginning of the year, where we review our figures from the previous year and present any findings that we have. Now, if we look at this change in behavior that we have here, when we look at this graph, this is showing you fraud activity throughout the week. Now, as you can see in 2019, so pre-pandemic, what we found was that fraud was being perpetrated mostly during the working week, so Monday to Friday, and actually between, believe it or not, the peak working hours, 9 to 5. And there was a significant drop off at the weekend. You can see from the slope here, it really drops off over Saturday and Sunday. Now, the pandemic and the lockdown obviously affected everybody, changed all of our habits and behaviors, and everyone had to adapt. The fraudsters were no different. What you can see here is that that curve, where we had a previous drop-off at the weekend, it then started to flatten out. So rather than seeing that the weekday was the peak time, we were starting to see less of a peak. It's a far less significant peak, and there is definitely more activity that's taking place at the weekends. In addition to that, we saw that it was taking place outside of working hours as well. Fast forward to 2021, so as the entire world is starting to slowly come out of the pandemic and start to try and find semblance of the new normal, we see a very different shape again. Now, there are various reasons for this, but what we're seeing is during the week tends to be fairly flat, picks up a little towards the end of the week, but most of the fraud traffic now is hitting at weekends. It's not only hitting at weekends, it's hitting sometimes around the clock on those weekend shifts. So this could be a perception by fraudsters, or it could be from experience that at weekends, maybe businesses' defenses aren't quite as high. Maybe they're a bit lower. Certainly that isn't the case if you're using a particular service that's operating semi-automated and has a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week service. But certainly that seems to be the perception given the volumes and the spikes that we're seeing. Now, the next thing I think we should talk about is how those documents or those fraud attempts are being caught. So we will flag fraudulent documents or fraudulent applications for a number of different reasons, but we picked out 3 here that are really good filters for assessing a document. The first one we should talk about is data validation, so a data validation fail. Then we've got a data consistency fail, and finally visual authenticity fail. So data validation is when a document contains maybe a calculation or there's some other aspect about it that we can validate using some kind of algorithm. It could be as simple as checking the expiry date, but it could also include check digits that may appear in certain numbers or certain segments of the data. So that's a validation rule. The next thing is the consistency fail. Now, the consistency fail is where a data point appears in one or more locations. We then take those different locations, we compare the data that's in them and make sure that it is consistent. So you can see that the biggest percentage that we have here, the first filter, if you like, that accounts for the biggest number of catches is the 55% on data validation. So you can see that's a very good net. The next one after that is, well, let's say the data consistency may only be a small percentage, 16%, but what that is that's on top of the 55%. So there's a good chance that that 16% also has a larger percentage that's also probably included in data validation, but we've already snagged that. The final percentage, this 29%, is what we call visual authenticity. So this is where we're looking at a document that has been attacked in some way, whether it's a complete fabrication or whether it's an alteration. And it may be that they've got the data validations correct, so they've done their research, and maybe they've got the data consistency correct because they've been paying attention to the document layout, or maybe they've only changed certain parts that don't have a consistency check. So that's where this extra 29% comes in. So we're assessing the document to see if it's actually fraudulent. The 55% you can see here is catching the, let's say, less sophisticated fraud. So this is our top 10 over the last year. Now, one of the things that's very interesting about this, at least from my point of view, was over the previous year, we found that passports didn't really feature too much in the top 10. We had maybe one passport, and the rest of the top 10 was dominated by national identity cards and driving licenses with the occasional residence permit or work permit. Now, that's clearly changed quite a lot. As you can see in here now, I think we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, something like 6 out of the 10 are now passports. There could be a number of reasons for this. First of all, maybe there's a perception that a passport has a better reputation, so it's more trustworthy, let's say. You have to do much more to get a passport. They have to follow international guidelines. They have to be more secure. They're used for border crossings, so maybe they carry a psychological reputation that makes them more trustworthy. The other point that we could talk about, and I believe this lies at the crux of it, is actually that we've got fraudsters, as we can see from the other changes in behavioural pattern, we've got fraudsters that are a bit more sophisticated and are starting to streamline their work. When you're counterfeiting or forging a national identity card or a driving license, that's a two-sided document. So you have to provide an item that has either 2 sides or 2 separate items to represent either of those 2 sides in 2 separate photographs. So that means you have to produce those 2 items. If you're producing a passport, all of the data is on one single biodata page. This means you only need to make 1 item. So it's actually a lot more cost effective and efficient from the fraudster's point of view to just produce that single item. And I believe this is why we're seeing that swing towards passports. The reputational or psychological benefit of using a passport, sure, but more importantly, you can make more in less time. We've also seen a bit of a swing as well. So 90% of the identity fraud that we'd seen over the last year involved counterfeit documents. So just as a quick stopgap, a forged document is an original document that has been unlawfully altered in some way, so that's a forgery. And a counterfeit is a complete raw production from reproduction from raw materials. So that's when you make something from scratch. And as you can see here, the overwhelming majority of cases are what we would call a physical counterfeit. So this is a physical item that has been completely manufactured by the fraudster. The smaller percentages that we see here as well, digital counterfeit accounts for a template of a document that has been created online and is only a digital representation. So something that is maybe a Photoshop template or something similar. We can talk about the fact we have very small percentages for forgeries, both physical and digital. The physical one is because to create a physical forgery, you have to have obtained an original document to unlawfully alter it. Now, that is costly. That is also a finite resource. When you get hold of those documents, they're probably better used to try and commit something in person. If you're producing something online, it's about volume. It's about getting as many hits as possible, as quickly as possible. And the level of sophistication on these original documents means that altering them in a physical way can be very costly and very time consuming. It's much more time efficient and resource efficient from the fraudster's point of view to create a physical counterfeit. Now, with the digital aspects as well, part of the reason why we see them as such a small percentage is because many of our clients adopt our native SDK. The software development kit, and that by its very nature requires that the applicant is using a live capture. We're having direct communication with the device, so we're able to try and prevent the upload of digitally altered files that would represent a digital forgery or a digital counterfeit. There are still some clients that for whatever reason don't adopt that, and that's why we see that percentage in there. But by and large, we're driving the fraudsters into that physical realm of counterfeiting, and that sometimes makes it a lot easier for us to catch. Interestingly as well is we've seen a swing in the sophistication level. Now we say organized crime here, I think it's probably fairer to say professional crime. We are seeing people over the last year or so from 2020, there were people that hadn't perfected the art or were maybe just starting out or just didn't really understand documents quite as well. So as you can see, the lighter blue color, easy fraud, is something that anybody could pick up just with a comparison document. Medium fraud, which has gone up, well, it's almost doubled in the same period of time. That accounts for elements or fraudulent documents that have to be examined by someone who has a fairly high understanding of document fraud. So not just comparison material, but an understanding of what in particular you're supposed to look for, which areas to highlight. So a significant swing. Certainly from my point of view, this represents a change in the mindset or the personnel that are attacking. One of the other interesting things that we see as well is that when you are comparing document checks that are combined with biometrics of some kind versus document checks that are just run purely on their own, there's a difference of about 3.5 times the amount of attacks. So 3.5 times more attack when we're just checking document, as opposed to an application that requires that the person submits not just a document, but also some form of selfie or video to confirm their biometrics. The graph we're looking at here shows you quite clearly that the darker blue is a static photograph or selfie as we would know it. And you can see that the levels are much higher for fraud, certainly not as high as it would be for document on its own, but certainly much higher than they are if we submit or we ask the applicant to submit a video recording of themselves. So the fraud levels tend to drop off a lot more when people are forced into that corner to actually produce a video. Fraud levels are much, much lower. So it's very, very good as a deterrent. And you can see why. With biometric fraud, at the moment, it's still, I'd say, relatively immature. So we have seen a bit of a change, but it's still mostly unsophisticated. Now, we put in brackets here for now because the likelihood is, as I've said for previous years, whenever we do our full predictions, deep fakes are around. They will become more prevalent. We will start to see more attacks that are using these. But for the moment, it's still not as widespread. Maybe the majority of fraudsters, they aren't using it just yet. But certainly we can see that spoofing is down a little bit from the previous years. Sorry, photo of the screen is down a bit from the previous years. Spoofing down a bit as well. So it's still relatively unsophisticated. Most people are now trying to adopt something like a video of a screen. That's the biggest upswing that we've seen. Another point to note as well is that fraudsters are starting to turn their attention to retail. Now, this is no real surprise. As we all understand, fraud follows money. Some of the other sectors that we've highlighted here, they still have their fraud levels and they will have gone up again over that pandemic period as well. But retail has had to take a foot into that market more and more. And as a result of that, you start to see the fraud increase as well. So as they're establishing better and better protections and asking more of the people that are opening accounts, we should start to see these figures maybe start to drop off as the fraudsters realize that this isn't quite as fresh a market or isn't quite as vulnerable as it was previously. But certainly at the moment, the financial and professional services, quite high up there, but they always have been. So what can we do to prevent this? Well, we have a number of suggestions. The first one I would always say to people is have a layered up identity verification approach. Make sure that you're gathering as many signals as possible. I like to think of it as having as many different nets as possible to catch the different fish. So step one obviously is verify the customer's identity document. Maybe with some form of biometrics as well. You need to be able to confirm that they are who they say they are on that document and that they're the rightful holder. And know that your customer is real by performing those biometric checks with some kind of motion as well. There are additional steps that you can take as well, and Onfido is always looking to introduce more and more of those as we move forward. One of those which I would suggest to people as well is leveraging deduplication technology. Repeat attribute is a very, very useful tool in fraud prevention. So we've got a couple of examples here where the fraudster is using the same face. Because they only have one face, they put their face on several documents and then they change some of the data periodically from each document. So if we were to use a product, Onfido has several products for repeat attribute, but one of them is known faces. Known faces has the ability to use that photo, that face, as a repeat attribute. So if the same fraudster is perpetrating fraud using different identities, we still have the face to tie all those cases together. So as you can see here, the example we put is they can submit hundreds of documents that have all got the same face. You know, it's much easier if we can pick that kind of detail out. Again, repeat attribute as well. We could use that on document number. We can use that on the identity if it pops up a number of times. So very, very useful prevention solution. The final thing I'd say as well is orchestrate to find the right solution for you. So a tailored workflow. Make sure that the verification method that you're using is the right one for the purpose. So does it need to be based upon your market? Does it need to be based upon your traffic or your volumes or the amount of trust that you're actually putting into that person at that point? As it says here, step users up to higher assurances. So you can make sure that you're verifying them as much as possible at the right point, and then that maximizes conversion. There has to be an amount of necessary friction, but at the right time, so you get people through those flows. At this point, I would like to hand over to Cody. Thank you very much for listening to me so far, and I'll hand over to Cody so he can take you through a live demo. Cody.
Thank you, Simon. That was super informative. I love seeing stats. I'm definitely a numbers guy, so that was some good stuff. I am going to bring you through just a little bit about what Simon just suggested. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Just a moment here. All right, here we are. And what you're looking at now is an Onfido dashboard. This is our one-stop shop for everything Onfido. It's a web app that you can log into, create your API tokens, look at results, and most importantly, build that multi-layered approach that Simon was referring to. So I'm going to take the next few minutes to just bring you through a quick example on how quickly I can use Onfido Studio to get off the ground running as quickly as possible and build that multi-layered approach. And then I'll actually walk you through the capture process and we'll look at a live result. So in the Onfido dashboard here, I'm going to go ahead and bring you into Studio. Studio is what we call our verification, onboarding verification workflow builder. So we're building an onboarding flow for our customers. We can have multiple, depending on geo or use case. And it's a visual builder. So I no longer have to code logic based on my API responses. If you're looking at an IDV vendor and they don't have an orchestration tool, that's a problem. Being able to come in here live and modify my business logic, build new conditions based on the analytics that we're providing is really powerful. So I'll bring you into the example for today that I've named, ID verification, facial biometrics, which are our flagship products. And then in addition, Simon had mentioned and given us a suggestion that we want to make sure we're doing deduplication. So here at Onfido, we call that known faces. It's a known faces verification. Have I seen that face before? In technical terms, and in regards to NIST and other standardization bodies around the world, you may refer to this as one-to-N or one-to-many deduplication or one-to-N matching. I'll load up the visual workflow here. And like I said, this is a drag and drop editor. You're able to enter the user capture steps. You're able to drag and drop all of the verifications that Onfido has to offer into a builder. You're also able to set different configurations depending on your requirements. As an example here, I've filtered to only accept documents in North America. This is based on maybe my risk and compliance team's requirements. Here in the US, I only accept driver's license, passport. Canada, I accept an additional identity card type. And so today we're going to run this live demo with capturing the identity card, and while the user's capturing their facial biometrics, in this case a photo, we're running that document report in the background. We're then going to make sure that the facial biometric photo matches what's on the document. Really important connection there to assert and confirm someone's claimed identity. And then in addition to that, we're layering on this additional fraud protection with our known faces report, or that one-to-many deduplication. Now, based on all those results, I've built out some conditions, and that's what's being represented here at the bottom. If everything clears, documents verified and looks authentic, the face matches that document, and my face has not shown up before in this tenant, it's going to be approved. And then I have other conditions that match my business logic. I can have as many conditions as I want. I can have a multi-level tree here to actually establish different conditions for different countries or different use cases, different business units. You can really get quite complex here if you need to. Cool, so that's the builder. That's a great tool that we released earlier this year. We're really excited and proud of it. All of the customers I'm working with today are excited about this. They no longer have to code any logic. They can build a workflow. They can do A/B testing as well. And the beauty is we have a live preview mode. So a click of a button, I can actually live preview this and test it before I deploy it to production. Additionally, we have a hosted option. So if you're looking to get off the ground as quickly as possible, you can come in here, use one of our workflow templates that we have built in, and then use the what we call hosted smart capture link. That's going to give you a link that you can just send out to your users, and you can start verifying identities as quickly as possible. So no development required for that. All right, let me wake up my iPhone here. Perfect. We'll go ahead and walk through this verification process. Since I'm based here in the US, I'm going to be prompted for the terms and conditions. This helps us comply with BIPA, if you're familiar, if you're a US resident. The Biometrics Information and Privacy Act is warranting this request here. I'm going to accept the terms. You can see this country list reflects what I configured in my workflow. So I can really customize this list based on what I set up in the in Studio. Go ahead and choose United States. In this case, driver's license. Again, I can limit these down. I'll go ahead and continue on phone. So if I were on my phone already, it would jump right into the capture experience. But this cross-device flow is initiated from it's initiated from a desktop to device. If I'm on, a Mac or Windows computer and I want to be able to take a good quality photo, we ask that the user hand it off to their phone. So I'll go ahead and I'll get the secure link, and then I'll scan it with my QR code here. And then it's going to open up on my phone. You can see on the left-hand side, if I'm on a desktop, that it's reflecting that my phone is connected and it's ready to roll. Go ahead and take a photo. I'll just do a blurry photo to start, just to show you that we do have built-in logic so that if we're capturing a blurry photo, we're going to warn the user. We'll also warn the user if there's glare or if there is not a document present in that photo. We'll give the user the option to redo and take a good quality photo. Capture the front. Gonna upload, do that check, make sure everything is all right, and then we'll capture the back. Now, if you remember from our Studio workflow, as soon as I click upload on this, it's going to go ahead and start verifying that document. If you haven't noticed, or if there's any identity card experts in the room, this is a pretty obvious fake ID in this case. So we'll see what happens in the results. The next step is going to be you get to see my pretty face. Prompt the user for consent of utilizing their front camera. And we upload that selfie. So we look back at the workflow. We've taken the identity document capture. We've done the face capture. We already know that document report is running in the background. We're going to match the face, the live selfie that I took, to the document, and we're going to run the deduplication process, and we should have results here pretty quickly. I expect that this, because my face has been used a few times before, that we may get a review on this one due to a previous face found. So let's go ahead and check that out and confirm my assumptions. I'll head over to results. Of course, all this is available through the API. We just like to show people through the dashboard. We think it's a nice, easy way for your manual review teams or your process teams to get in there. They need to do some analysis or research on what's going on. You can load up the results page. You can see this Alex sample just done a minute ago. And this is going to give you all the details you need about that applicant. What I like about this is it's very clear and concise on what went well and what went wrong with a particular user. You can see here that my document was rejected. It's a fake document, fake New York driver's license. The face did match, however, it is my face on the document, so that's good. But unfortunately, I was flagged during the deduplication process. I'm a previously seen face. We see two types of previously seen faces. We see fraudulent users, as Simon mentioned. We also see genuine users. So known faces has two use cases that are useful to organizations. And our customers that do use that feature are really, really happy with that. They can direct their good users to account recovery flows. They can then redirect their bad users to where bad users go. One last thing to point out here is that we also have workflow analytics built right in. So you can see exactly where your users are going through the flow and what their ended outcome was. So in this case, I can see exactly how much time I spent in the flow and when, and I can see the status that they received at the end of the day. We kind of correlate all this data over time, and you can really start to see different trends. If you build out different A/B workflows, you can really analyze what's going well for your users, introduce new tools or verifications as you see fit. And that concludes the demo. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try and get them answered. If we don't have time to answer them now, we will follow up with you via email.
Thanks, Cody. You took the words right out of my mouth there. So do feel free to ask us any questions that you may have at this point.
Any questions coming in? Let's see. All right, well, I guess we answered everything that people were hoping for. How many times have you watched Tinder Swindler, Simon?
I have watched it all the way through the once. I found it fascinating.
Only once? Okay. Yeah, I haven't gotten through it yet. I need to sit down and definitely dig in a little bit more. There's some good shows out there depicting what we're talking about today. If there's no other questions, maybe we'll give people a minute, but
give people a couple of minutes just to type it up in case they have. But otherwise, thank you very much for your attendance today. I can see a few people are starting to drop off now. If you do want to get in touch with us, you can reach out to us at onfido.com/sign-up. That's sign-up, and Onfido is onfido.com. Otherwise, thank you very much for your attendance today, and it was a pleasure presenting to you. Thank you.
Thanks all.